Good morning. So we completed the Gemara discussion as well as the relevant section in Shulchan Aruch discussing the laws of the 4 cups of wine. That would be chapter 472 in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which began first following the pattern of the Gemara with the laws of reclining and then the laws of the 4 cups. That's what we concluded. And now we're back to the Gemara, and the Gemara is going to introduce another halacha. And then we'll learn the relevant section in the Shulchan Aruch that discusses that halacha. It's a very simple, straightforward halacha, and we'll see the details as it's unpacked in the Gemara and then in the Shulchan Aruch. The halacha essentially is the obligation that everyone has to bring joy to their Yom Tif, and not just to their own, but to their family as well. Now, this halacha is introduced here, presumably because in the context of the 4 cups of wine, the Gemara also told us that you should include your children, right? The Gemara told us that children are essentially obligated in the 4 cups of wine. Now, obviously, they're not doing that. So instead, you're giving them nuts. You're giving them nuts and, roasted nuts and seeds. Right? That was like a treat for kids to keep them engaged. So from there, the Gemara gets the next halacha, which is meant to engage your family, which is the mitzvah to bring them joy, to bring them simcha. So this is where we are, and it's Daf Kuf Tes Amud Aleph, page 109a, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the top of the page. Right in the middle, the line begins with the word Kedei Shiachilu Es B'neihem, and then after that is a Taf Reish, that's Tan Rabbanon. Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught. So this is the sages of the Gemara, the Amoraim in Babylonia, quoting from the Mishnaic era. And the Mishnaic text reads, quote, so the Gemara is not quoting a text from the earlier generation, namely, Chayav Adam, a man is obligated, the Sameach Banav Ubnei Beisai, to bring joy to his children and the members of his household, Beregel during the Yomim Tovim, on 3 Yomim Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. One is obligated to bring their family, wife, children, joy. Shenemar, as the verse reads, is Samachta b'chagecha. You shall be happy, you shall rejoice on your holidays. Now, from the fact that the Mishnaic text quotes it as such, Shenemar, as the verse reads, the indication is that it's a biblical commandment. And indeed, we'll see from the Alter Rebbe, it's a biblical commandment to bring joy to our families. You have a mitzvah to put on tefillin in the morning. You get a mitzvah to bring joy to your family on Yom Tif. Same thing. So the Mishnaic text continues. The Mem Mesamcham, in what way are you obligated to bring them joy? Says the text, B'yayin, with wine. Wine brings joy. Drink and be merry. Rabbi Huda says, I don't know if Rabbi Huda is arguing with the opening sage. The Mishnah first says wine. But then Rabbi Huda says his statement. I don't know that Rabbi Huda is arguing so much as qualifying. Namely, Rabbi Huda says, Anashim, men are to rejoice, Beroy lahem, in that which is appropriate and worthy and what brings them joy. And Nashim and women, Beroy lahem, in what brings them joy. So it's not like universal, everyone has to drink wine.
It makes you joyful.
Men are obligated to indulge in what brings them joy, and women to indulge in what brings them joy. Namely, Anashim Beroy lahem, men are to engage and indulge in that which brings them joys, b'yayin, wine. That's the Gemara's assumption, that men get happy when they drink wine. So v'nashim b'mai, but women with what? Now, this little word b'mai tells me that we're no longer quoting the Mishnaic text. How do I know?
I think it's when it says Aramaic.
It's Aramaic. B'mai is Aramaic, which means the end quote from the Mishnaic text would be here, men in what's appropriate for them, and women for what's appropriate for them, end quote. And now the Gemara is asking, Anashim b'mai beroy lahem, when Rabbi Huda said that you're supposed to give, men should indulge in what brings them joy, that's yayin, that's wine. The nashim b'mai, but when the Mishnah says you're supposed to give women that which is indulgent and let women should indulge in that which is joy for them, what does that mean? This is the Gemara analyzing the Mishnah text. Right? All the Buddha says is it's subjective. Right? So the Gemara asks, well, okay, so men, we get it, they drink wine, they're happy, good. What about women? Yeah.
To get happy.
Yeah. What should they indulge in to bring them joy? The Gemara's assumption is it's not wine. It's not the Gemara's assumption. Otherwise, it wouldn't ask the question. And also, it would be the same for men and women. Right? Yeah. Presumably, the Gemara is assuming that many women might want to be a little bit more reserved and not just indulge in wine. Maybe, perhaps. And we'll see a little bit about that in the Shulchan Aruch too. So the Gemara asks, what did Rabbi Huda mean when he said that there's a different, like there's a joy that men like to indulge in and a joy that women like to indulge in. So for men, we got it, wine. What about women? So Tani Rav Yosef taught. Rav Yosef now is from the Amoraic era, from the Gemara's era. And I know that, so just little cues give you an idea of where to place everybody. Because he's introduced as a Rav, not Rebbe. If it's a Rebbe, it's a Tana from the Mishnaic era. It's a Rav, it's the Amoraic era. Right? So now we can kind of place where they are. And the more you see these things, the more you'll be able to place people relative when they are. Because you'll see this person speak in the name of that person. Okay, so he's before him. Right? So you slowly get an idea of the picture of who's who.
Just all those lines.
Sorry?
I'm waiting for the big reveal.
The big what women like to have. Okay. Yeah.
Was that by
it's not gonna be so shocking. What?
They changed the designation of the band.
I think the demarker for the change in designation was Israel versus Babylonia, which later to us means Tana and Amara. Yeah, I think that's the distinction. I believe so. Okay, so Tana Rav Yosef taught the Bavel in Babylonia. What's good for women is the big day tzivonin, colored clothing, designer clothing. So it's popular in Babylon. Women like to wear colored clothing, so buy them that. Better Yisrael, in Israel, the big day pishton, miguhatzin, in linen clothing that had been nicely ironed and pressed. And it's either a function of, okay, so the way Tosfos says it is that in Babylonia they didn't have they didn't have the expertise to do a proper ironing. So it wasn't like so nicely pressed, which meant that your linen would be super wrinkled. So it's not as nice. In Israel, where they have this proper technique for doing proper pressing, so they can get them linen pressed, nice linen clothing. So in Babylonia, so you can't get it with the nice pressed, get them colored clothing. Which there's an interesting thing here. Well, first of all, the point here is buy what your wife likes. That's the main point here. And it's a halacha. You have to buy your wife a gift before Yom Tov. Right? It's the same halacha. You have to drink wine on Yom Tov. It's the same halacha that you have to buy your wife a gift before Yom Tov, as we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch. But what's interesting is that the Gemara doesn't disregard fashion. The Gemara doesn't say just buy them nice clothing irrespective of where you are. The Gemara kind of says buy her what's presentable and enjoyable in that particular region. What do people like to dress like? Anyone, but certainly women like to be presentable in their communities. So make sure it's presentable in her community. In Israel, they like color clothing, get the color clothing, the press clothing. In Babylonia, it's the color clothing, get the color clothing. Which is an interesting little thing. The Gemara is like telling us to not just buy your wife clothing, but buy something that's fashionable, something that works where she is, so she'll enjoy it. Yeah. Okay. Tanya, we learned. And again, Mishnaic age text. Rabbi Huda ben Beseira, Rabbi Huda, son of Beseira, Omer said. So now, okay, this is a little bit more subtle, but
Ben what? Sorry.
Ben Beseira. Ashkenazi pronunciation. Betera.
That's the Rabbi Yehuda from Tanai.
Okay, so that's what I was going to get to. Before we had Rabbi Yehuda saying that men get what they need and women get what they need, to which Rabbi Yosef interpreted to mean wine versus clothing, right? Rabbi Yosef interpreted many years later. Now we have Rabbi Yehuda, but not just Rabbi Yehuda, but Yehuda ben Beseira. right? Now, the sons of Beseira live in the temple era, mid-temple. Beseira would live just before Hillel the Elder. Second temple time. So it's after Hanukkah, sometime after the story of Hanukkah. Within probably a few decades, maybe a little bit more. Hillel the Elder is right. Is like Hillel and Shammai are during era that's of the Zugos, of the pairs. Shemai Avtalion, right? They're in the beginning of chapter of the Pirkei Avos, right? The beginning of Pirkei Avos, it goes through the order of like the generations, and Hillel and Shammai are there toward the end of the Zugos, but still there. So maybe it's within a century, I think, after Hanukkah. So Rehuda, son of Beseira, would now be meanings in temple time. So this helps us qualify a bit, because this text doesn't have to contradict the previous text, because the previous text was talking post-temple era, and this text is now quoting in temple era.
But they're both Tanaic.
Both Tanaic, because Rehuda, who compiles the Mishnah, lives after the temple is destroyed, but collects teachings in the last couple centuries going back into the temple era.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, Rehuda ben Beseira says, Bisman shebeis mikdash akayom, when the temple is standing, ein simcha ela babasar. The only available, there's no joy other than the joy of enjoying good meat. Now, why would good meat be only enjoyable during the times of the temple? Well, because the point is not the meat, but the point is which meat you're eating. Shnemar, as the verse reads, "V'zavachta shlomim," you shall offer a shlomim sacrifice. A sacrifice in the temple is a shlomim. It's the carbon chagiga. It's the carbon of the celebration, in which you bring a peace offering. And a peace offering, it means that the people who offer, the owners, also get to enjoy. Right, a portion of it gets burnt in the temple on the altar. A portion of it gets given to the kohen, and a portion goes to the owner. So it says, "There's a v'achal you should offer a peace offering. V'achalta shalom, you shall eat it there in the temple region in Yerushalayim. V'samachta, and you shall rejoice before God your Lord." Yeah. So in temple times, the enjoyment would have been in the meat that you're enjoying from the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. Now, if I'm correct that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, which I believe I am correct, lived in the times of the temple, then the next statement from the Mishnaic era is the Mishnaic editors commenting on what was just said. But now, She'ein Beis Hamikdash time, there's no temple standing. So us now in the times that the Mishnah is being produced, where we're post-temple era, in Simcha El B'Yayin, there's no joy other than wine. Wine brings us joy. Shenemar, as the verse reads, V'yayin yisamach levav enosh, wine brings joy to the heart of man. End quote. So somehow something changes. In the Mishnah, in the times of the temple, meat, specifically the meat of the carbon. And now it's wine. So it's a funny thing. Like, was wine not enjoyable in temple times? Is meat not enjoyable now?
And wine was also part of the service.
Libations, but there's no wine. There's no wine offering that I drink.
No.
The altar takes the wine, right? So, right. Sorry. So what is the meaning of this? On one level, you could say, look, in times of the temple, they're on a more spiritual level. Right? The verse says, you should, you should offer a peace offering, eat it there, and rejoice before God your Lord. The rejoicing of the meat is specifically that it's before God your Lord. Right? So there is a component that the body enjoys, the meat, but primarily it's before God your Lord. Right? But now in the post-temple era, the eating of meat would not be before God your Lord. It would just be your belly. It would just be your body enjoying it, it's not the financial lakecha. So it's just, we're going to learn the Shulchan Aruch that actually you're obligated to have meat. We'll get there. But presumably in the temple times, the meat wasn't just a physical experience. It's the financial lakecha before God your Lord. But now that we don't have that before God your Lord, that's where wine comes in. The verse describes it as wine brings gladness to the heart. right? And then presumably, perhaps, we can go even further and say that the wine, if it opens up the person's heart, actually might help him feel Lifnei Hashem Elokach before God your Lord. If done correctly, which we'll learn in the Shulchan Aruch how it can be done correctly. Perhaps. And that's why it switches from meat to wine, not because one is more enjoyable at some point in history, also becomes less enjoyable. I think the key there is that when you're Lifnei Hashem Elokach, when you're before God your Lord, then the meat could be a godly joy. But when it's not before Hashem, then the meat is just an indulgence. And post-temple era, now you get to the wine. Okay, so with that, let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. The children, sons of Becerra were
lived
in the times of the Beis Hamikdash.
Was mentioning
I'm Googling him right now.
offering.
He's the one that mentioned, Yehuda, Ben.
It's interesting because it seems out of order in chronologically, right?
I mean, why? They're two different texts.
Gemara would have mentioned
Yehuda and Becerra, the first.
instance of the Mishnah.
Sorry?
Wouldn't the Gemara mention the earlier context before the latter context, meaning when the temple was?
Well, the first thing the Gemara does is brings up what the halacha is.
I know it's
The sons of Becerra.
It's not in chronological order generally.
No, the Mishnah's not in chronological order. It's in conversational order. So the Gemara first brings up what the relevant halachas are because you just talked about giving it to kids. Now, having talked about how you get your family excited, joyful, the halacha brings up another Mishnah text. I'm just reading from Sefaria here. The sons of Becerra were a group of scholars that seemingly took over the leadership of the Sanhedrin after Shmai and Naftalion, those pairs, while quickly succeeded by Hillel. They, in their sense, continued to be involved in Torah study and legislation at the highest level. Right? This is the sons of Becerra. It's Mishnah. It's times of it's temple times. Unless Yehuda ben Becerra is not part of the sons of Becerra, but I'm pretty sure they are. He is.